Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane. And today I am joined by the lovely Doug White. Doug is a United States Air Force veteran. He has had an extensive career in law enforcement, spending 25 years at a large and busy agency in Florida, retiring in July of 2023. He's an outspoken advocate for the mental health and wellness of the first responder and veteran community, as well as suicide prevention, after experiencing some of his own challenges throughout the course of his career, which has led Doug to write a book and becoming a published author called Hiding in Plain Sight, which I have in my hot little hand if you happen to be watching right now. So it's Hiding in Plain Sight, the truth about trauma, service, and the way forward, which truly is, because I am in the process of reading it currently. It's an authentic, raw, and beautifully written memoir, which shares some harrowing experiences in an effort to share his own lessons learned, and focusing on resilience and the love that helped him survive and post-traumatic growth. Doug's also the podcast host of Tell This Story, where he has conversations with fellow first responders and veterans, with a focus on empowering those in the same community that thriving is possible and not just surviving. So with that resume, I will say good day to Doug.
Good day. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
My good day is not as nice as yours, but that's right.
That's all right. That's all right. Points for effort. So obviously a very expansive resume there, Doug, and I'm looking forward to speaking about a lot of different topics with you. But I guess I'd sort of like to bring you back, and like I mentioned at the top, you are a United States Air Force veteran. What can you tell us about your service in that capacity?
Well, I enlisted in 1993, went into the Air Force as a security specialist. There were several things that I wanted to do, and I'm sure you've already passed that part in the book that, the space shuttle paratrooper and all the wonderful high-speed, wonderful things that young men want to do.
Exactly.
But I went security forces. It was security police, which is basically the Air Force's version of military police. But we also have a force protection side of that in addition to law enforcement. And I was on the force protection side. I knew that when I got out of the Air Force, if I did decide not to make it a career, that I needed something that would transfer into the civilian community. And law enforcement seemed to be the natural fit for me. So I served my initial 4 years on active duty in the Pacific Northwest. I did not rust despite 9 months of rain for 4 years. Got off of active duty and came back here to Tampa, Florida. And I went to work for the sheriff's office. That was, plan A. And it was a half of a plan. It was get home, work for the sheriff's office. And my military time continued while I was seeking employment with the sheriff's office. I went to an active reserve Air Force unit up in the Panhandle, and was lucky enough to come back down here to Tampa to Headquarters Special Operations Command, where I served just over 10 years. And that was in conjunction to my sheriff's office time. So they were running concurrently with each other.
Yeah, I was wondering whether there was a little bit of overlap there.
A lot of overlap. A lot of overlap.
And it sort of sounded like you really, and from, everything I sort of read in your book, you really kind of took every opportunity to not better yourself because you needed to be better, but it just kind of sounded like you were just hungry for knowledge and whatever capacity that you could get it, as well as how you could implement it into your service in, no matter the capacity, whether it was in the Air Force or in your policing career.
Yes, I had a problem with overcommitting. I never said no to a professional opportunity or school or training, any type of knowledge. I was hungry, just trying to get as much as I could and be as useful as I could. Yeah.
And then, and that really sort of, obviously came through in the parts of your book that I've read. And then so when 9/11 happened, Did that mean, because I think you went back on to active service, did that mean that you took leave from the police department or the sheriff's department, or how did that work?
I did, yes. So I was in the active reserve. So I still was drilling, doing the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. And
Okay.
actually, when I got to
Is that kind of like the National Guard here? Like, is that?
yes,
Yes.
reserves
Okay.
and National Guard are very similar in their
Okay.
drilling schedules.
Okay.
At least they were then. So I was assigned in December of '97 to Headquarters Special Operations Command here. So I was there for several years. I did that as a full-time job until I got hired by the sheriff's office full-time in July of '98.
Mm-hmm.
So I was still very active out there. I was basically working my days off from the sheriff's office at the base.
Mm-hmm.
And I had I want to say I just came off of orders, long-term orders. I want to say September 6th or 7th of '01, and had just gotten back to, full swing at the sheriff's office, and 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And before the first tower came down, my phone rang, and it was the command, and they said, "We'll see you in the morning."
Mm-hmm.
And I went and worked my last shift with the sheriff's office that day and reported September 12th at about 6 o'clock in the morning. And was there for 37 months and 18 days back on active duty. So,
and it was sort of all steam ahead at that point.
It was. We got there. They said, "We don't know how long this is going to take." I said, "Well, I'll give you 180 days until we get a better way forward." And by December, they had me for a full year. And I said, "You know what? Let's see this thing through." And I just continued my orders until it was time.
And it sounds like you additionally worked with a lot of men that you really respected in that capacity and learnt a lot from, and service is a theme that really runs through your book, and I know that we'll probably get to it where that may have been somewhat to a detriment to your life outside of your profession, but it sounds like it was something that gave you a lot of joy and just that kind of intrinsic motivation that I'm serving my country, I'm serving my community, and this is something that's really important to me and was deeply ingrained in you from like a young age.
Yes, no, absolutely. Having been raised in a patriotic household, in the '70s and '80s and early '90s, it was, I grew up playing in the woods, a couple of blocks from my house with my buddies, and we camping and Boy Scouts and playing with GI Joe and playing quote unquote war with the guys with stick guns and all that stuff. So I always felt it was my purpose to serve my country. And I was introduced when I was on active duty. I was introduced to Special Operations Forces when I was stationed in the Pacific Northwest at McCord. We shared a fence line with Fort Lewis, and they had the 2nd Ranger Battalion there, 1st Group Special Forces. We were inundated with SEALs. We had Air Force Special Operations there, co-assigned or co-located there at McCord. And it was always something that I was drawn to. And I couldn't do it myself because I had no depth perception at night. So although I was fully qualified, I can't land planes at night. So my special operations in the Air Force career was cut short. And as you know from the book, but being assigned to headquarters, Special Operations Command, was an opportunity for me, especially during that time, to be associated with the greatest men and women who have ever served in those capacities. My leadership journey was, it didn't start there, but it was honed there.
Yeah.
And having the opportunity just to be assigned with the personalities I was assigned with and learn from and being mentored by those folks, it was the greatest professional honor of my life.
Yeah, sounds like it. And really, honorable service too. And so then what was the transition like? Obviously, you'd obviously been with the sheriff's office previously, but what was that transition like after sort of go for that 37 months, I think you said it was. What was the transition like back to kind of that more of a law enforcement role?
That was very weird for me. Coming back, the team that I was on and the people that I worked with. And to be very clear for your listeners, I was not a special operator. I was an Air Force cop who knew how to speak the language, and I knew how to do protection for individuals. But 90% of our team was made up of special operators. And because of that, the trust and the skill are at a whole different level.
Yeah.
Your rank has nothing to do with anything except what you get paid on the 1st and the 15th of the month. That had nothing to do with what your job was or what your capacity to complete tasks was. So you were relied on your skills. It was usually a first name basis. And if you were in charge of this section of the mission or whatever it was you were doing, then you're the boss for that section. So having professionals like that in a military organization, but with the understanding that that you're a grown up and you're being trusted to do grown up things, and there's no checking, to go back to a paramilitary organization where you're just the new guy coming back.
Yeah.
That was weird. I actually have a running joke. It's a 20-year running joke with one of the guys. He was new and got there while I was gone. So when I came back, he meets me on patrol, and he asked me how I'm enjoying being, out on the road by myself without my field training officer. And, granted, I only had, 2.5 years in patrol before I left. I had, 10 years of lifetime experience under me by that point. So I said, it's great. And, we get on the first call and he sees, over my name tag, all the medals and stuff that I had from the sheriff's office before I left. And so, he's called me new guy. We have a running joke and have had for 20 years. But shifting gears, being an unknown to most of the people there, but the supervisors knowing me before I left and what I was doing, we would get on scene and, they would get on the radio and just say, Doug, I need you to do this, this, and this. And I was quite the enigma. Nobody knew what to think of me except for the supervisors until they started realizing in the stories. But it was a weird transition. On the professional side, that was the funny thing. But the personal side, having left feeling that I did not fulfill my purpose, as you've read the book, and I don't want to give it all away, an injury kept me from deploying with my teammates. And that was quite a hit to me because I felt that was my life's purpose. And then to have left them without fulfilling my end of that or doing what I felt was my share of the task. It was hard. Being without tribe, purpose, and mission, and trying to find it again, going back to the sheriff's office. That was quite the deal. Quite the deal. It took a long time to unravel that.
Yeah, understandably so. And where were you sort of in like a personal sense? Like, I believe that you were married by this point. Did you have children by that stage too?
No, we were 8 months pregnant. And I say we in the corporate we, I wasn't, my wife was. 8 months pregnant with our first.
Don't be that guy.
No. 8 months pregnant with our first. And she was born a month after I got back to the sheriff's office. So being back for a month, getting my feet wet again and getting my legs stable, then going out for an extended baby leave. It was nice to take that time with the family. It was getting back that whole transition itself, now new parent. And it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think, and we may get into this later, but I think what we lose sight of is when we are those ages, 18 to say we do 30 or 40 years in one of these disciplines, every big thing in our life is going to happen during that time. So it's not just what's going on at work and the things that we're experiencing and the, the allostatic load, as it were, that we're taking on over that time, but we're human beings. We're partners, we're spouses, husbands, wives, brothers, sons, moms and dads. So all of those big things are going on in addition to the world that our coworkers see. So, yeah, I think we lose a lot of sight of that. I know I did for a while personally. But.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is incredibly common too. And we probably will address that a little bit later. But one of the things that obviously, I've listened to some of your other podcasts and read, most of your book and all that kind of thing. And you had like a lot of different roles under the banner of being a police officer. Obviously, you said you were a patrolman, you were an FTO or a field training officer, instructor, you reach being a lieutenant and everything like that. But the one that I am a little bit intrigued about is the certified bomb technician, because I don't think I've actually ever interviewed anyone who went down that path. I may already know the answer because I think some of your experience doing courses with WNDs and stuff like that in your military service sort of probably rolled into it significantly. But what took you down that path to become that?
That story goes back to the 80s, actually.
Oh, all right.
So
settle in.
No, I can cover it pretty quickly. But again, patriotic household. My family was all about service and the old red, white, and blue. My Saturdays were spent watching black and white war movies with my dad. That's how I grew up.
Yeah.
So with all of that being said, I was in a household that was very well aware in the late 70s and 80s and early 90s of what was going on around the world. In particular, terrorism, the Middle East, the Far East, Northern Ireland, all of these things. And had an overactive imagination. And, growing up as a kid, I knew what that stuff was. I understood it. It was kind of odd. I remember in sixth grade, I did a book report on Libya. And so that's when Gaddafi was acting up back in the late 80s, mid 80s. Anyway, fast forwarding, going into the Air Force, force protection was our big deal. We had nuclear security and aircraft security, and it was an anti-terrorism mission. Yeah. So not only now do I know the theoretical sides, I'm aware of the theoretical side of terror. Now I'm protecting assets and figuring out the practicalities of it. Yes. So I'm figuring out how they employ their tactics and how to stop or at least mitigate the effects of their tactics. So going through my Air Force career, being well aware of that stuff, it's just something I always had an interest in. And going back on active duty, of course, after the attacks of 9/11, that was it. That's the game in town. Unfortunately, that had to be the name of the game. But fortunately for me, that's a world that I had been familiar with for at least 8 years prior, studying and understanding through my military service. So I did everything I could. I took every emergency management course I can get my hands on. I took every WMD course I can get my hands on, trying to fully understand and prepare myself for being a professional in that space. Because, the war on terror did not occur on 9/11. This was the warm, Cold War that has been going on since, with our involvement since 79 and at least 83. So,
and they were all like the embassy bombings and the lead up to it and the proceedings and all that kind of thing.
So being aware of all of that stuff and understanding how those things have worked, I just prepared myself for that. So when I went back to the sheriff's office, I had all of this knowledge that I had prepared myself with. And, civilian law enforcement, that was not generally a focus, widely. It was crime prevention, community-oriented policing and stuff like that. So I was a rarity. Yeah. And preparing myself even more for that stuff. So when I came back to the sheriff's office, I had all of this stuff under me, and I had gotten an offer from Homeland Security to teach for FEMA and subcontract through some of the people that were handling their instructional contracts to teach weapons of mass destruction and everything else. And, it dawned on me statistically at the time, 85% of all terror attacks were taking place with the use of explosives. Well, I can't be a practitioner if I'm missing 85% of the game. So Bomb Squad had a tryout, and I tried out and I made the team. So I wanted to be a well-rounded practitioner. Yeah. So that's how I wound up on the Bomb Squad, and I loved every minute of that 7 years. operationally anyway.
Yeah. And so would, because I know like the police force I used to work for, they had their own bomb squad and everything too, but that was like their sole duties. Did you guys, like, were you a normal patrolman and then you'd be on call, or these were like your sole duties and that was your entire focus for those 7 years?
I was still a patrolman. I was an active field training officer. And a lot of my rookies got to go to bomb call-outs with me. So we said, okay, this is how specialty teams get called out. And this is post-blast and, crime scene. So there's a lot of stuff to be learned there. But yeah, I spent 6.5, 7 years on the bomb squad as a tech. It was a lot of fun. We were very busy. We handled 9 counties here in Central Florida.
Yeah.
And I think we were averaging just over 260 activations per year because we have all the Buccaneers games, all the U.S. University of South Florida games, the parades, the fairs, regular call-outs. I mean, we've done pipe bombs, suspicious packages, white powder calls, did it all.
And how, I mean, I know like you just gave like an average of a number, but as in from like the call out to like an actual, it could be like a suspicious package, which some dumbass like left their backpack lying around somewhere, as opposed to really coming across those devices and all that kind of thing. Like what was sort of like the ratio, I guess, in terms of that?
I'd have to go back and look at all that stuff. I left the team in 2011.
Yeah.
But I have worked on live devices. We always went with the understanding that if it's suspicious to you, it's suspicious to us.
Yeah.
So it's a device until we prove it's not a device.
100%.
So everything we always treated, it was the live thing.
Yeah.
It was always live as far as we were concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's the one time you're complacent that you end up changing your lighting conditions and it's all over.
Absolutely. It's like, when you're a cop and you're learning about firearms, it's always loaded.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Same kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I have worked on 8 live devices, pipe bombs.
Yep.
Yeah, there's been several calls where like, oh, look, that's a pipe bomb. Oh, that's a for real one.
Yeah.
So yeah, there have been several, and we've had post-blast investigations and all that stuff. But large car bombings like you see in some of the larger metropolitan areas, now we've not had that. But we've gone to places where like people were making suppressors for firearms, and there were enough things there, enough energetic materials to make devices. We were very busy. We have an FBI office here. We have an ATF office here. So we were very busy with that, and our partners, the Tampa Police Department. So we did a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine you guys probably also like got called out for like in terms of like search warrants when they come across that kind of explosive material, if it's not necessarily constructed. Like we, back in my days as a detective, we would, if you came across any kind of clandestine laboratory, like you were just like, all right, we're out, and you call Clan Labs, and then they have to come in their suits and clear it all and all that kind of thing. So I can imagine that was sort of up your alley a fair bit too sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes we would have Clan Labs reach a critical state and explode. So we'd get called in for the post blast, and of course we'd walk in and say, "Nope, Clan Lab, not us." Or
like, peace out.
Exactly. Or we would get there and, hey, there's a lot of red phosphorus and this and that and everything else, and patrol would call us, and we'd walk in immediately and say, "Nope, Clan Lab, everybody out."
Yeah.
So the Clan Lab guys, I wanted to go to that school so bad. They got so much awesome kit and training. But anyway, I could not have taken on another thing. So
yeah,
I tried.
I think bomb technician is pretty high up there in the cool sounding stakes.
Well, it was great. We would make fun of the SWAT guys. We're like, "Oh man, you guys are so brave, lining up at a door with automatic weapons and night vision at 6 of your buddies at 3 a.m. That's wow. How do you do it?" And of course, we
I'm sure they appreciated that.
they did. They were like, "Oh, whatever, bro." I'm like, hey, look, there's a device, and it's just where'd everybody go?
They go exactly.
Why'd everybody leave? It's just me now. Okay. But I love all our SWAT guys. They were
Yeah.
they were great,
Yeah.
big brothers.
And it truly sounds like you just almost every role that you either took on or fulfilled or anything like that, it really brought such a important sense of like you're saying, that service and that purpose to like everything you did and every role that you were in. And additionally, like it sounds like as well, that teacher part of you was really just kind of on point during your career. Like you're saying, like I got to bring some of like the new blokes out to like the bomb call outs, like, to have a really good, knowledgeable supervisor who is also willing to impart their knowledge onto you is, something that I don't think can't be matched. Because as like having been one of those junior officers and just like kind of in like a heat-seeking missile looking for someone in that respect who is not only awesome and intelligent and knowledgeable and experienced, but willing to impart that, is incredibly important for those junior members.
For me, that was the privilege of leadership and the benefit of being a field trainer to just to pour into the younger troops. And it was amazing. You would start a shift and they were having trouble or struggling, and then just at one moment, it's like a light switch. And it's amazing to watch that. Just a quick story, if you have a second for it. And it's about the leadership and teaching. When I was teaching for Homeland Security, I had a guy, he was the statewide commander for Alabama for their bomb squad. Retired Army explosive ordnance disposal. I mean, the guy was Elvis of the bomb world as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
And I would teach with him for time to time. And one night after class, we were having dinner, and he says, how do you do it? I said, what do you mean? Now, again, at this time, I'm 30 years old, roughly. Yeah, 30 years old, 31 years old. And this guy's got more experience in a bomb suit than I have on the planet. And so, well, what do you mean? He says, when you teach, he said, everybody's just sitting in their chairs and they follow you when you move around the classroom. Because I'd like to move in the rows and engage people. And he said, they're like a bunch of meerkats just kind of, watching you. I said, well, I don't know. And he says, no, it's amazing. He says, I don't notice that anybody else has that interaction with students. And I thought about it for just a second, and I told him, I said, it's like tying shoes. And Erin, I swear I came up with this right as I said it.
Yeah.
He says, well, what do you mean it's like tying shoes? I said, well, if you have kids and you teach them how to tie their shoes, it's something that we take for granted because we've been tying our shoes, me for 48 years or whatever. But it's a lifelong skill that we're going to learn that we will ultimately take for granted. But when you spend that time teaching your child how to tie shoes, you do it over and over and over. You get that repetition. And finally, they get it.
Yeah.
And they tie their shoes. You've spent a lot of quality time with them teaching how to do that. They've enjoyed the time. They have learned something you've taught them. You've taught them something, and now they've demonstrated to you, and they are so happy that they've been able to demonstrate this and show you they can tie their shoes. And now tying their shoes is like the most special thing on the planet. Well, if you have the opportunity to witness magic like that, or you have the skill to be able to teach someone how to tie shoes, and why would you ever, ever, ever miss that opportunity? Shame on you.
Or take it for granted.
Exactly. And he was like, wow, I was like, yeah, that was pretty deep. Wow. Who would have thought?
The word right out of my mouth.
Yeah. I mean, I was a kid myself. How am I coming up with that thought over a spaghetti dinner? But it really was. And I think for me, when I was in leadership positions and teaching, to be able to see that switch, it was such a gift. It really was. That, to me, that's one of the privileges of leadership.
Yeah, no, and that deeply resonates. And I was even just speaking to someone the other day who is a retired firefighter, and he teaches classes, and we were chatting, and he was like, to see it like wash over them, and to see that recognition of like that, and it like that when they finally get it, he's like, there is just nothing like it to be in that position. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege to like you're saying, and I think there's, we're speaking over a screen, so I understand that, but you have a presence about you. It's like the way that you hold yourself. It's the way that you speak. It might be like that little gravelly voice you've got going on there, which I'm sure is great on a podcast. There is, it's engaging. You know what I mean? Like it's so, I think it's on top of the knowledge and the skills that you're wanting to impart. When it's not being delivered by the right method, it can get lost. But when you're combining your skill set as well as not an arrogant presence, but like a commanding presence and a confident presence, like that is kind of sometimes like the right chemistry or the right makeup to be able to, pass it along in the right way.
That and passion and excitement. I would get very, very excited, and I've developed 80-hour courses, and I'll get 2 and 3 slides ahead, or start telling a story. Said, guys, I'm supposed to tell you this in 2 hours, but I got to tell you now. And you get the critiques back at the end of these courses, and just you see that this is the best class ever, and just so knowledgeable. And if you tell somebody 2 + 2 = 5, but you're passionate about it, you're like, oh man, I need to look into that. Let me take a note. 2 and 2 is 5 now, because I believe it. Doug believes it. I believe it. It's great. All these graphics, and if you can do that, and there's so much power and so much responsibility that goes along with that. You're teaching people in the the first responder and the military professions. You're teaching skill sets to kids that these skills, one, are hard learned lessons, but it's something that they can carry throughout their careers, and they'll pass on to other people. And to think that I'd have a legacy is kind of ridiculous and a little bit arrogant, I would think. But I remember being a supervisor, reading reports and getting the reports. I'm like, who wrote this report? And then I'll wait a second. Okay, I taught this person who taught this person who taught this person who now taught. I'm reading, my 5th generation recruits reports, and it's as if I wrote it myself. I'm like, man, this is just, it's incredible. So to see, to get echoes like that, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, it would be. And as well, sometimes you're in the position where you're teaching people things that one day might end up saving their life. And that there is a lot of heaviness involved in that. But when you are seeing it pass down the lines, I think it means that you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Not for nothing.
Well, and if you're, depending on where you're at in the book, if you read the vignette, We Went to Work, the shootout. Every training theory that I had been validated in that one event. So yeah, it's good. If you have the capacity to be an instructor or to lead, you have to do it.
Yeah, and not everyone can.
No, not everybody should.
That's probably a better way to go about it. A better way to phrase it.
Like, you can be anything you want. No, I think neurosurgeon is something you should probably leave on the shelf.
Yeah, not everyone gets a trophy.
Yeah.
And look, you have had, such a vast career and vast experience, both in the military and in the police force. And I take no joy in, condensing it down to what have we been going for, like just over sort of 30 minutes now, because it is incredibly important. But I also, don't want to take away from the things that you share in the book and be a spoiler in regards to that. So I do want to sort of move on a little bit in regards to some of like the mental health aspects of your career. Whilst giving respect to everything that we've left alone in the book for everyone to read at a later date. What was your knowledge in terms of the, I guess, like potential effects that, the roles that you perform could have on your mental health, sort of like prior to, say, like 2019, what sort of like education was there? What kind of programs were there? Was there anything that you were like, well, this is probably something I should be aware of?
Nothing. And if there were, I completely missed it.
Yeah.
I was busy. Drive on. I knew that I was having issues here and there. Um, Personal relationships, sleeping, um, physical stuff, pain, just, cost of doing business type deal. Yeah, I really didn't put any of that stuff together. I knew there was something. I didn't know what. Yeah, I never. Then, to me, and I think to a large degree, well, a smaller degree now, but then to a large degree, post-traumatic stress disorder had the disorder. There's something wrong with you. You weren't tough enough to stave it off, or you didn't know well enough to toughen up, to ruck up, to drive on. All of the things that people of my generation and older than me have always said.
That sort of cultural stigma. Yeah.
Exactly. That old boys don't cry type deal. Drive on, and yeah, I just think I started wearing thin, and I did not identify the problems I was having until it was too late.
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, it's seasonal affective disorder or seasonal.
Yeah, no, that's right. Seasonal affective disorder.
Seasonal affective disorder. Oh, it's Christmas time, so I'm getting upset. But wait a second, mine was coming in June and July, and had been for years.
Yeah.
Like, why is this? Why am I upset during summertime? Just because it's 100% humidity? No, that can't be it. So I was not aware of all of the things. I never, a lot of the stories that are in the book, I never put words to until I was journaling after I retired, and it was all there. These were things that I didn't even peel into when I started seeking counseling. So, as far as I was concerned, it was a disorder, and that was something that people got who weren't strong enough to see their way through. And knowing what I know now and having experienced what I experienced, wow, I could not have been more wrong or more unaware of self or anyone else. Even though I had been saying for years to that point to my my platoons and my squads, it's okay not to be okay, and having these conversations like, hey, something comes up, you have an issue with something, come to me, come to one of your supervisors, come to a peer, something, talk to somebody. And I look back on it now, and that was probably subconsciously my way of trying to get somebody to step up so I could say, yeah, I can talk to you. Let's talk about this together. So yeah, there may have been things. I know we had an employee assistance program, but that was if your kids are having problems adjusting to middle school. That's what that was for. That's for families, for marriage counseling, or depression because your neighbor's cat died, or whatever it is. You can use it for anything, but it's not for this disorder because it's a disorder. So.
And there's that I guess that sort of, like you're saying, like that cognitive dissonance going on of like you're explicitly being a good leader and a good supervisor, being like, hey, it's okay, if you're struggling, you're finding this difficult, come chat to me. And then no one's turning around and being like, thank you for saying that. Like, how are you doing? There's no one.
No. And I was the biggest hypocrite in the room for years because I wanted people to come talk to me so I can help you with your problems or get you to the EAP or to get you to speak to who you needed to speak to. And I was never taking that advice myself. So
I don't think you're the first one to be doing that.
No. And I'm in good company. And it's funny, the more I have these conversations with people, I'll get a message or even sitting and having coffee with a friend and they'll say, oh man, I thought that was just me. No, no.
Yeah, absolutely. And so having obviously reached this part of your book and listened to, some other interviews and things that you've spoken about, I understand you had quite a in one night in 2019, you had quite a harrowing and confronting moment while you were on shift. I want to preface it by saying that I know that this probably isn't something really easy for you to talk about all the time, and to the extent that you're comfortable, what would you like to share with me today about that incident?
Well, Erin, honestly, I wasn't comfortable with any of this stuff until I started talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
In that book is 208 pages, and it's every fear, every shortfall, and everything that I've done wrong and everything that I've done right. So to this point, I didn't say this out loud to anyone outside of my wife until June of this year. And I stood in a room of probably 100 people, and there were deputies in there. There was a sheriff from Central Florida there, and family members. And it was a PTSD awareness breakfast for a veterans charity. And I got up and told my story. And the story is that in the section of the book called The Break, there was a time in late 2019, roughly from April to October, that I was dark, very dark. I had been having, all the physiological and emotional signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress injuries, all of it. The anxiety, depression, hypervigilance. Well, hypervigilance is something that's always been there and is still, there are shadows of it still. But I was having anxiety and panic attacks. Yes, there's a difference. And I found out rapidly the difference between the two. I was having those on order of 3 and 4 a week for about 6 months. I was not sleeping. The sleep that I was getting was 1 hour to 2 hours, maybe 3 hours a day, for 6 months, days on and days off. If I was asleep, I wouldn't have a dream. I would have nightmares. Sleep apnea was a huge thing for me, which was weird. And again, these are all things that I found out and figured out after the break. I had convinced myself that I was not worthy of love. I was unlovable. I was a loser. I couldn't keep myself together. And everything was falling apart. Again, I was high drive. I was high functioning. No one professionally knew what was going on. I tried to speak about it a couple of times and even preface the conversation I had with my boss. I told him, I said, basically, I feel weak for even bringing this up. And I was self-deprecating in my attempt to ask for help. But fast forward without giving the whole the whole book away. October 19th of 2019, I was sitting behind a school, 3:00 in the morning, and hopeless. It was just dark. I didn't see any way forward. I didn't see any way out. For weeks on my days off, I would just sit in the house with all the blinds drawn, no TV or anything, just sitting there in a quiet, vacant room. There was nothing to look forward to. And I remember staring out the windshield, and my headlights were on a traffic cone in the middle of this parking lot, this big orange traffic cone that had been run over 100 times by school parents. And I'm staring at that traffic cone, and I remember thinking to myself, there's a pistol on my hip. I could take care of all of this right now, and it'd be over. I'd be free. And as I'm thinking that, I realize, fuck, I'm holding a pistol in my hand right now. I mean, there was no, okay, well, let me just see how this feels. No, I'm having this thought, and I'm now staring at this pistol. And it scared me because there was no way to explain this to anyone. There was no note. There were no signs or symptoms. I hadn't spoken to anybody. I hadn't asked for help. This would be a mystery. And I didn't think of the second and third order effects of my kids or my spouse or anything other than this is never going to be explained. And so I just drove around for the rest of the shift. and trying to contemplate what I had contemplated and figured it out. And, I had been to countless deaths by suicide, and I understood the act, and I understood where someone, or theoretically where someone may have been when that was the action that they took, but I never reconciled that as my end. I'd always had it's always darkest before the dawn. The new day brings new promise, and all of these things. But here I was with no new day, no new promise. And yeah, that's where I was. That was the break. Not the turning point, but that was the break.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that, because I can't imagine that it's easy, and revisiting that kind of darkness that you felt in that moment. I'm sorry that you experienced that, and I know that you have taken that and used it to push yourself and propel yourself forward. But it, like you were saying, it doesn't occur in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've met, and it says in the book, like, to not be sleeping, or maybe at most 3 hours a night, if that much, that you got for a 6-month period, and all of the different symptoms that you were experiencing. Like, it all takes its toll, and there is a reason that sleep deprivation is a torture, like a means of torture.
There's I know there have been studies done, and I don't have them in front of me, but from what I'm told, they not sleeping and people working midnight shifts in the responder disciplines, after a certain amount of time, your cognitive function is basically, you have the cognitive abilities of someone who is drunk. Like, yeah, well, I could see that, because I know that when I was sleeping, even though my physical, everything else physically, blood work and all that stuff were out of whack for years, and had to have been. When you're sleeping, you can stave off a lot of the things that generally would not affect you, or they don't become as glaring. Yeah. But when you're not sleeping, no, you can't. You can't. It all comes back.
Well, because it affects your, immune system. It affects your ability to be able to heal. Like you were saying, you were in kind of, chronic sort of pain all of the time. Like, when your body is not getting that chance to, rejuvenate, like it's only going to go in a very poor direction. And even as the spouse of someone who, firefighter, 24-hour shifts, he can be awake for 40 hours pretty easily, like a couple of times a week. And we'll have full conversations, and he has no recollection of them at all. And I just literally turn to him and I'm like, you do know we did this yesterday, mate. Like, and again, like the memory consolidation, that happens when you sleep. Like, all of the things, being able to take on, knowledge, it consolidates. So it's, I can't even imagine the place that you found yourself in at that point. And it kind of sounds, it's going to sound weird, but maybe you will understand it, as someone who lost someone to suicide. Like, I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about someone being in that state, because you want to understand when you've lost someone in that way. Like you're saying, that there are no answers. There were no goodbye notes. There were no, hey, this is like the big freaking explanation of why I did this. So to spend a lot of time reading, researching, wrestling, reconciling, healing, all of the things. So to be in that amount of despair, I'm sorry that you found yourself there.
Well, thank you for that. But to be honest with you, here we are 5 years now, just over 5 years removed in a month, just removed from that. I could not have explained what was going on with me then. It wasn't until March or April of actually this year that I started getting answers and started figuring things out and finding the way forward. So to have someone who wasn't in the know of everything that I was experiencing, to try to piece this together and reverse engineer into an answer, it would have never been done. I mean, again, it's taken me 5 years of concentrated introspection and work to finally get a handle on this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like it's been, I'm not going to use the word journey because I hate that bloody word, but it's just a real impactful path that has, like you're saying, led you to where you are today.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about sort of you have that moment and what was that first, I guess, step forward after thankfully you holstered your weapon. What did it look like for you moving forward from that moment and getting to a better place?
Oddly enough, this is the part where I get emotional.
I know why.
So get the book. If you've heard any podcast of mine, you're hearing this or you've heard this already, but I got home at 6:00 in the morning after my shift, and my wife, Michelle, was already awake. And this was a Sunday morning. She didn't have a run planned or anything like that. And there was no breakfast cooking. Not like she would wake up and cook me breakfast if I asked, absolutely. But anyway, it was uncommon for her to be awake that early on a Sunday. And I walked into the room as I always did, and she was already awake sitting up in bed. Now, she had no idea that for the previous 6 months I'd been going through this, or years. I thought she had no idea, but she did not know that I had convinced myself that I was unlovable, and that any conversation we have is going to be the conversation where she says she's leaving me. Um, not to use profanity, but being a worthless bag of shit in my head, she's finally going to realize that I was the silver medal, that I married way outside of my means, and she has finally come to this realization 19 years later. So I walk in and she says, "Can we talk?" And I was like, here we go. Oh. I hadn't even taken my boots off. I'm still wearing my gun belt, and I am 3 hours away from staring down a pistol. She has no idea and would not know that part from months later. But she said, would you consider going to marriage counseling with me? And I fell to my knees. And for the first time in at least 15 years, I cried. My hands clasped at the foot of our bed, begging, pleading. Yes, anything. Yes, I'll do anything. And she was kind of taken aback by the response. And we had a long talk. I didn't share much of anything, but we came to the conclusion that something needs to change and that we're going to work on it together. So later that week, we went to our first counseling session and got done with the counselor. And the counselor, I'll never forget this. I remember it almost as minute by minute. The counselor says, "There's nothing I can do for you." I just kind of looked at her. She says, "I don't counsel couples like you." I literally threw my hands in the air. I was like, "Yep, I knew it. It's over." And the counselor and Michelle were both like, what's going on? I was like, "Are you drunk or something?" And she says, no, you don't understand me. She says, you're each other's best friends. There's nothing wrong with your marriage. You could work on boundaries and communication. I can give you some books, but I'm not going to waste your time and money by counseling. I can, here's a pamphlet to read. And I couldn't understand why. I'm here with a professional. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I here? Why are we doing this? And the counselor asked me, she said, "Doug, let me ask you something. How are you sleeping?" And Michelle says, "He doesn't." "Your name's not Doug." She says, "I've spent every night that he's been home for the last 15 years watching him sleep." She says, "The most heartbreaking thing I've ever witnessed. He fights in his sleep. He cries in his sleep. He stops breathing. He gasps for air. He doesn't dream. And if he does, it's a nightmare." And here I am thinking to myself, prior to walking in here this entire hour, I'm thinking I'm sitting next to a woman who despises me, just to find out and have it revealed to me that she has spent quite literally the last 15 years paying attention to every breath that I take, waking and sleeping. I was really confused. And the counselor said, "Doug, what's your mood? Are you normally low? Are you high?" And Michelle says he's low. So, well, that's not true. She says, "You don't find joy in anything. There's no joy in your life." So that's when the counselor He said, I want you to speak to this person. They deal with veterans and first responders and culturally competent. And so that's what I did. And I found out afterwards that Michelle knew the only way to get me to seek counseling is if we did it together, and it was pitched to me to go to counseling with her so we could work on us. Had she come at me,
smart lady.
I don't even have the words. I could get deep on it and start tearing up, but that's not this show. She's brilliant. I'll never be convinced that she wasn't put in my life to save my life on October 19th of 2019. There's no, this is not even a discussion to talk about the merits of that statement. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
She knew. And had we had this conversation the day before, it wouldn't have landed. And had we had the conversation the day after, it would not have landed.
Yeah.
Had she said, you're broken, you need to get help or I'm leaving. No. None of that would have landed. It happened exactly the way that it happened when it had to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the spouse of a first responder who sees them walk through that door, when you know someone so intimately like that, and you know intimately the job that they do because you've watched them do it for however long. Take my own first responder experience to the side. When you know someone and you love them so deeply in the way that it sounds like Michelle deeply loves you, you read their body language, their eyes, their breath, their intonation, even in like a text message. There is just something so deep that it's everything nonverbal is actually still a language. How they sleep, how they breathe, how they dream, how all of the things and I can't, I would never equate it to what you and Michelle have been through, but I can understand it.
No, it's quite the thing. She takes such good care of me. I mean, even today, she knows, not today, but recently, she knows that I have a bad right ankle. Yeah. And if we're walking, through the neighborhood and there's an acorn or the sidewalk's uneven, she'll say, watch out.
Yeah.
She points these things out to me, knowing that because if I roll my ankle, I'm going down. Yeah. No, it's yeah. Again, I married well outside of my means. I married up.
I mean, I'm sure you believe that. I doubt she does, because she would not have stuck around for, what is it, 20-something years
24 years now.
24 years. There you go. We just, my hubby and I just knocked over 10 in March. So coming up on 11. So.
Yeah, but if you take that, I mean, those are first responder years. It's kind of like dog years. So a regular marriage, 10 years, whatever. 10 responder years, that's like 30 anywhere else. It's a long time.
It feels like that some days. But maybe in both respects, maybe he feels like it's dog years being married to me. I don't know. When I wake up in the morning and I'm unintelligible because of my Australian accent, either tired or angry. That's when I go real deep. But I think, and I said this to you offline, and I'm not going to read it all because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But the dedication in your book, it speaks volumes to what you just spoke about in regards to Michelle. And if you don't mind, I just kind of like to read just like a tiny little bit. And it says, it's my opinion, and I'm certainly not alone in this view, that the loved ones of first responders and service members are brave and bold. They have bound themselves to us, and by extension, are bound to our service. And it goes on a little bit later, and it says, as partners, they hold us together and have front row seats as we walk towards the edge and stare into the abyss. They hold on dearly to the person they once knew, hoping for them to return. And I think I said it to you when we spoke last week, and additionally in an email, that's like the first thing you read in Doug's book is this
first line of the book.
Beautiful and it's a dedication, but as I said to you, like it's an acknowledgement that I don't think every first responder spouse ever gets. And I'm even just like welling up having like reread it. Like it really touched me, and it kind of made me go, wow, like this is going to be a really special book, because for him to have the insight and to be able to just kind of like acknowledge and stand outside of his own service and everything that's happened to him, and then turn it around and go, I now actually have an appreciation, and I can acknowledge how everything that I've done has not only impacted me, but then also impacted my partner and also impacted my children. It's really powerful, and it just sets off the beginning of reading this book to go, holy shit, this is going to be really real and really authentic and really raw, and it is. But that the respect and the love that you feel when you read that, like I found it personally very impactful and highly resonated. So thank you for including it.
Yes, you're welcome. But my answer to that is, how do you pay tribute to someone who saved your life?
I think that question's rhetorical.
No, it is. You can't. That's a debt you pay back every day. And the first thing that I think that we need to do as responders, and you didn't ask this question, but I'm sure you probably are. But I think what we need to do is, once we get to that point and we get to the dark and we start coming back into the light, part of the journey is acknowledging our own culpability in everything. If you read the book and listen to my story and have conversations with me, I'll freely admit that everything that occurred or happened for me, I guess, based on the perspective you want to take, it was all self-inflicted. Had I known what was going on with me, had I had the knowledge of these things, these neurological changes, these things that cannot be compelled, this thing that is not a disorder, it is a part of the human condition, and it is your body adjusting to keep you living in the job and the profession that has chosen you, and that you've chosen. This was my calling, and again, by standing at the altar with me, Michelle has bound herself to me and to my service. And I have to acknowledge that. If I'm, I hate to say, I think the word masculinity gets a bad rap nowadays. But if I were to be a man that is worth anything, to be able to claim how I served or to value my service, you have to have the character to know where you went wrong and where you could have done better. The things that went on in my personal life and professional life, I could have certainly done things better. I took her along on this journey with me, and it's not necessarily the path that she wanted. And but she picked up where I did not. She took care of me, our family, herself. I refer to her and have been referring to her as my hero, my shield, and my retreat, because she is every one of those things. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we have to acknowledge our part in what's going on in our lives if we want to fix it. If you don't want to fix it,
absolutely,
just drive on. You can do it alone. You're not going to get far. But I will tell you, to fully answer the question of what happened after I got home that morning, I was not strong enough to have done this on my own. I was not. I needed her strength. I needed her guidance. I needed her help. And were it not for those things, who knows? I probably would have continued to drive on. I'm very aware of addiction, so it's not likely that I would end up in a bottle of booze. Had I continued on my path, and declined her help that day. Best case scenario, I would have been divorced years ago. Worst case scenario, I would have been dead years ago. There's no, after I think, what is it, page 116 or 125, something like that in the book. After that, it's nothing but blank pages. And that's as simple as my story gets.
Yeah, because there's a lot of self-destructive paths that doesn't have to involve alcohol or drugs or anything like that. Like it's I've spoken to other guests about it. It's that kind of passive suicidality when we are in roles as first responders. It's the firefighter not masking up. It's the cop not, dismissing backup when they really freaking need it and putting themselves in those situations.
Interview some of the deputies I used to work with and ask them how many times I asked for a backup, or how many times I got on the radio and asked them to hold the station. And when I did, they knew it was time to get down. So, I mean, it's just that sounds kind of flippant and arrogant, but that was the case. How I'm speaking to you now that's what my voice sounds like on the radio during a traumatic or event or a cascading event. I didn't get excited. I was always on point, always on the shield, always the first to the door. If there was a fight to be had, I was down. If I got a bomb call out, I told the dispatcher, wait 20 minutes before you call my number 2. That way I get there first. I get to be the guy in the suit. I'm running the call. Kicking doors in. The stuff that I did, and I scared the scary. And it was the persona that I had overinvested in, and was it risk-taking behavior? Looking back on it now, I did some crazy stuff. So really dumb stuff. I mean, it was brute strength and gross negligence, a lot of it. And it just kind of worked out.
Thankfully.
Thankfully.
And not to, I don't want to intrude on your family's private life, but I guess just kind of from your perspective, and we will sort of get into how it came about with you writing the book and everything, and how that has changed things for you. But I guess having the realization that you have now, and like we've just talked about, in your perhaps overinvestment in, which is a noble thing of wanting to serve, but at times it seems like it was to the detriment of your marriage and being a parent and all of that kind of thing. I guess, how have you marched forward without betraying any confidences with your children and with your wife in that respect, since you've kind of gone, oh shit, I think there are things that, I could have done a bit better?
I had to, counseling with Michelle was one thing. Working on communication, trying to figure out what boundaries were professionally and personally. There were some professional issues that came up, and I'm not going to give away the book, but I enjoyed and valued my career until I didn't.
Yeah.
And, again, I wasn't strong enough to make some decisions for me. So the organization made a couple of decisions for me, which made it easier to separate from that persona. My relationship with Michelle is something now that it never was before. And it gets better every single day. Most couples will say, hey, can we schedule some time to talk? Or, hey, can we talk about this? Now it's just, okay, so, this was said, or, hey, I was thinking today. And there's no setup. And it's just, I give her all the information. She gives me all the information. And we decide what we're going to do with that. There's a locus of control there. If you have all of the information, you get to decide how you're going to use that information to either help or to intervene or to process and provide feedback. If you try to tailor the message or, curate, the inputs, you're feeding them your story. And that's not fair to them. It doesn't give them a chance to add value, and you're not getting the value. You're creating your own echo chamber. And that's not healthy. it's been a 5-year process to move forward. I am mindful, or I try to be mindful every day of the places that I've fallen short in rebuilding the relationships with my kids. They have not read the book. I would like them to, in their own time. I mean, I was present professionally and I was present physically, but I was never present in any moment that I lived in over that 25 to 30 years. So trying to be the person that I want to be and show up the best way that I can, it's not always easy. And it's going to be an ongoing thing. And that's the thing. Every day you have to work. I had somebody reference the Alcoholics Anonymous book, the Bible that they're given when they go to their meetings and all that stuff. And, my father's a recovering alcoholic, and he's been recovering since 1983. Hasn't had a drop to drink since then.
Good for him.
But he takes his sobriety very seriously.
Yeah.
And he'll be the first one to tell you that once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. You're just in recovery. And it's a conscious decision every day not to take a drink. Well, when you're working on yourself, I think that same analogy applies.
Yeah.
That every day is a conscious decision to do better, to be healthier. Pay attention to what you're letting into your life. Remembering who you were and having respect to the people around you, not to return to that.
Yeah.
Because I could easily shut back off and overreact at everything. And so that's the clearest answer I can give you, because I'm just the book that you have. I mean, it's been available for 14 days today.
I was going to say it's only been a couple of weeks.
This is the book represents the very beginning steps of my journey. What I figured out to the point where I started working, and I'm still working. There's going to be another book to explain everything that I've figured out that's in the book. This thing has become 3 or 4 different things. I mean, my messaging and to use the entrepreneurial term, the branding for this is about to change again, because I want to make sure my voice is what people are getting, and I'm still trying to find my voice.
Yeah.
So the answer to all of that is I'm still finding my way forward with relationships and me.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, look, the fact that you are cognizant of that, I think is incredibly important, but also powerful. And you and I had a bit of a conversation offline last week, and like I said to you, like you're still in the trenches, and it's not a bad place to be. But like you said, you're still. It's not like, oh yeah, all this shit happened like 20 years ago, and as in your healing journey, and you're still like every single day you're even like undergoing a new treatment program, which we will sort of talk about shortly. Like I think it is incredibly admirable that you are still in the trenches, but yet you are sharing it all with everyone in a really like beautiful and authentic way, because it's hard to put ourselves out there. Like, as someone who I do a podcast and I talk about my life, I talk about my losses, I talk about some of my experiences, I talk about my marriage. I try not to, get too personal, more because my husband's not on social media and it's just like, whatever. I try to be respectful in that sense, but it is hard putting yourself out there, knowing that you can't control what's going to come back. So I think it's really admirable what you're doing.
Yeah, that's been the difficult part, because I was always very, very guarded. But I know I started putting this stuff out in very, very small doses back in June. And, I picked who I shared this with, and I wanted to make sure that I picked people in the audience that I was going to be sending this to.
Yeah.
And of course, Michelle read everything before it went anywhere. And she said, there's things in that book that we've never discussed. So there's things in there that I've never put words to.
Yeah.
So that speaks to the power of writing and journaling too for self-help. But in putting it out there, I sent it to people that were my old teammates at the command to see where it would land. And there were things that brought up conversations. We're like, bro, if we had talked about this 20 years ago, we never knew.
Yeah.
And some of the other guys were saying, yeah, we always knew. That's why we've been saying these things and doing this and telling you to get help and telling you about us getting help. And there are so many wonderful things that have come out of it. I mean, I was on a call last week with a guy who was on duty, like far northern U.S. on his lunch break. I mean, body cameras there, and he's on his phone talking to me about just a podcast that he heard that I was on, what it meant to him, and how he has a story. And getting your feedback about the dedication. I've had neuroscientists, PhDs, psychotherapists, tier 1 operators, cops, firefighters, dispatchers, all sending me wonderful stuff. And I've got one person who it upset me, but I learned a valuable lesson that not everybody's going to receive the message, and not everybody's in a position to receive the message.
Yeah.
There was one other guy that said, why don't you just suck it up and drive on, do hard things? I'm like, this message isn't for you yet.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point and you turn that corner, you'll realize what it is I'm talking about. You're not there.
Yeah.
With all of that said, I would love to be able to have the capacity to go back and show those people the way, but I'm never going back there. I can't, not for anybody. I'm never going back to being in that position or putting myself. I'm not surrounding myself with people who are there. I can't. But here's a stake in the ground. This is where I started. Here's the book. This is what I'm doing now, where I'm going. Follow me. I'll show you the path, but I'm not going to walk you down the path. I can't.
And I mean, it's the old analogy that probably gets overused about you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like, I think mental health is challenging because if you haven't experienced it yourself or watched, but potentially watched a loved one, I think there can be a bit of like a lack of empathy, or just like a bit of apathy. Like you're saying, it's like, oh, we'll just like fucking suck it up, mate. And it's like, yeah,
it's a little more than that.
But it's that old thing of like, walk a mile in my shoes and then come back and talk to me, because I don't sit here and say that I understand your life or everything that you've experienced and gone through. So who are you to sort of, because you have this snapshot, which is pretty detailed and explicit and my truth, but you're still only getting a snapshot, and then I have the courage to at least put it out there and share it, and you're criticizing me for that. I can think of the words that I would tell that individual, but as much as I enjoy my explicit rating on this podcast, I'll hold him in for now.
Well, I was going to say, I'll tell you exactly what I wanted to say.
I'll let you do it then, Doug.
No, it's easy. I don't want to use all the cliches. You've never stood in the arena. What have you done with your life? And all of this other stuff. But anybody who knows me personally, and without the snapshots, who's been on calls with me, who's been in my life, and who has had actual conversations with me that aren't like this, they know my character. They know where I've been, and they don't doubt me for a second.
Exactly.
God, I don't want to go back to old Doug, but anything critical of me has never been said to my face. And I would have to think there's a reason for that. So take that for what it is. And if somebody does want to come to me and discuss it with me, I'm more than happy to. Actually, I take that back. There's a guy who's known me for years and years. We served together at the command, and we worked together at the sheriff's office. I saw him at the gym, and he told me, I'm not a big fan of yours. And like stared at me like intently.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, well, what is it do I need to apologize to you for? Is it this, or this? I said, because it's any of those things, you need to stand in line, champ. And he's like, oh, so, do you want to clarify that? I said, yeah. And I clarified it. He goes, man, I have a lot of respect for you. I said, dude, I have respect for you because nobody has ever come to me with that bullshit before.
Yeah.
So our friendship was minted because he had the character to bring it to me. Everybody's on their own journey, and I'm not going to be mad at somebody. I would love to say, hey, get fucked. You don't know anything. But in fairness, I don't know where they're at. I don't know what made them say that or why they thought they could say that to me. But you know what? I'm in a different space now that if you're not receiving the message yet, that's good.
Yeah.
Because it means you haven't been there yet. And I hope that you hear the message before you get there. I don't want anybody to be sitting behind a school with a pistol in their hand. And if it takes me putting my entire life out there to help one person or to have these conversations, then there it is. I have found that owning your story, all of it, and putting it out there makes you incredibly powerful. Just the level of ownership and honesty. If you want to hurt me, I've given you 208 pages of information. Twist it however you'd like it to be, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good place to come at it from. And we all, anyone who does anything online, we all, I think, have experience with those delightful keyboard warriors. But I think something you said is quite telling. It's like, it takes a little bit more courage to say something to someone's face than it does to type on their phone or on a computer screen or anything like that. And I think it's that kind of thing where it's like, all right, well, if you don't have the balls to come say it to my face.
For me, it's not even courage, because people can be stupid and have that the bottled courage.
That too.
But it's the character.
Yes.
What I have to say is going to be constructive or destructive, and we should have this conversation. Okay, that's character. Bring that to me. And I want to see your point of view. I want to understand your perspective. But if you're just going to be taking shots from, a keyboard, I don't have time for that. I got to go to the grocery store or something. Got to get a haircut, whatever. I don't have time for you today.
Or, just give a fuck about anything besides you, mate.
Yeah, pretty much.
And before we sort of traverse down the path of how the book came about and everything like that, I guess to kind of put a bit of like a bookend on, your career, because I do know that you retired in July 2023.
Yep.
There's a part of your book, and it's a quote, and it's not by you, so I'm not stealing it. It's by is it Friedrich Nietzsche?
Nietzsche.
Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into the abyss will gaze back into you. And I felt like that was a very powerful quote, because I think it also, even just kind of like the name of my podcast, I'll hold space for your darkness. Like, I think we, as first responders, we experience so much darkness. And from, reading your book, you've bore witness, you've been involved, you've all of the things, and you don't share experiences and anecdotes in any form of a gratuitous way. It's very factual. And, each one of them is something that you've kind of like taken a lesson from. And I'm sure this is such just like a very small handful of things that you've experienced and witnessed and gone through. But I think it is really important to note that, like, we see the darkness. How easy is it for us to be engulfed by that darkness? And it really, like, reading that quote, because I've seen or heard that quote before, and I was like, oof. I'm like, it really, really hits home. Very much so. But yeah, so you chose to retire in July of 2023. So it's probably coming up on 18 months now. So tell me about what that was like, and I guess where you found yourself to sort of start writing.
The transition out was odd. And I've said this on other podcasts, you're these things or this persona that either has been built around you or that you've built up yourself and contribute to. But you're this thing for 5 or, in my case, 31 years. And you wake up the next day and you're not that anymore.
Yeah.
It's very weird. So my off ramp to retirement, I love teaching. So it's like, okay, I'll get my master's so I can teach undergrad. And I got my master's. I was like, I don't want to teach undergrad. I don't want to teach kids how to write and teach them what I want to teach them.
Yeah.
But everybody figured, oh, Doug's going to be a professor. I went as far and I even got accepted to a doctoral program for adult education. Took the first class. I was like, yeah, this is stupid. This is not what I wanted to do. Don't need a PhD to teach undergrad, and I don't want to teach undergrad. I interviewed for a university and walked away when we were talking about salary. It's like, yeah, this doesn't put me on fire. So thank you for your time. I considered going and being a contractor for Department of Defense. It's like, that's it. I'll go back and I'll support the soft enterprise and do my thing. And, everybody's like, oh, that makes sense. But it's not what I wanted to do. I thought it was, and I felt passionate about it, but it was an answer. And I looked into getting an MBA, was accepted to an MBA program, and decided, what am I going to use an MBA for? Maybe I'll be a project manager. Looked into the PMP certification. Was like, well, I'm going to take a class to give me a piece of paper for stuff that I've proven for 25 years.
Exactly.
I had all these ideas of things that I wanted to do. And, everybody had the $1 million question, what's next? What's next? And, I always wanted to have an answer for them because I figured that was important. But what I learned when I retired, and it got dark, the transition was very, very dark. I reverted back to where I was. And there was a point, December last year, January of this year, that I had reduced my reason for living. Is because if I'm dead, there's no pension check, and the kids will do without. So I had gotten to that place where I had no purpose, I had no mission, and I was trying to figure out who I was, and it finally dawned on me that I could be anything I want to be. I am free with zero risk. At the time, I just turned 50 last December, and I'm retired. I've got a lifetime of experience. I can take this and do anything. I can translate this into business. I can translate it into teaching, Department of Defense, podcasting. But when I retired, I started journaling, and I had these booklets and notes all over the place. And things just started pouring out of me. And around probably January, February of this year, I started reading through what I had done, and it was 77,000 words, which, from what I'm told, and after having done this book, that's roughly 300 pages worth of a paperback book.
Yeah.
And I read what I put in there, and it was a chronicle. It was my hero's journey, but I had written myself as a victim or a bystander. I was like, man, what do I think of myself? If I've written myself as a victim, I have never been a victim. Any role that I've played, I've been a central theme, been the central character in anything, whether it was villain or whether it was the protagonist. I was always, in reality, a positive figure, professionally anyway. So I really started diving into that and thinking about that. And I put it aside and realized that was the journal that I should have kept for 30 years, but was dismissive about journaling or speaking about feelings because that's dumb. It doesn't work. Yeah, no, it does. It really does. And so a lot of introspection, looking into those calls and the lessons learned and the things that I could have done better. And that draft is now, actually hiding in plain sight is completely different than that draft. It is what I figured out about myself and the story I started telling myself, the honest conversations. from that draft, from that journal.
Yeah.
And it's owning, again, all my culpability. The stuff that I put in there. Yeah, if I was a douchebag during that event, I was a douchebag when I retold it in this book. There were things that I've learned that I could have done better.
Yeah.
And that's turned into hiding in plain sight. And it wasn't until July and August of this year that it really took shape and became what it is now. And of course, the messaging is changing, the tone is changing. I thought this was going to be a motivational book. And if you read the back cover, this is not another collection of war stories. And it's like, oh, this crime drama and, motivational, tough guy, cop stuff. And that's where I was when I wrote the back cover. But when I actually got this book in the beginning of October and actually held a copy in my hand before it went to publish, it wasn't that. It was so many other things. It was an apology letter to anybody who's ever loved me. There was a love letter to myself, a love letter to Michelle, and and speaking to Rebecca Lynn on her podcast, the Proud Police Wife podcast. I realized the messaging that was there, not just for first responders and vets, but the spouses. I mean, my God, I start the book off with that line. How did I miss that this was who this message was for? Because cops and firefighters and veterans, we don't buy books to read. Those are dumb. We don't do that. We wait for the movie. Our spouses, on the other hand, who are actively looking for opportunities to help us, looking for the answers for us, they're the ones buying these books, listening to these podcasts. And God, there's so many wonderful things about responder and military spouses that they are the unsung heroes. I mean, they are the thing that pulls us back from the abyss. They're the reason we go home. They are the shoreline, the North Star. They're the beacon, the thing that always draws us back. And I missed that until I was holding the actual copy. And, this isn't about trauma and hurting. This is about life and moving forward. And so, yeah, this whole thing has been more growth for me in the last 5 months than in the last 5 years. It really has been a magical thing. And you know what? If it all ends now, if it never sells another copy, if somebody calls me and says, hey, we're going to give away a copy and where do we get a bulk order where you make nothing? Here's the web address. My goal was to write and publish a book. Hard stop. That was the level of success that I put on this entire project. And here we are now.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and that's absolutely beautiful in the way that you describe it. And I love that, you were getting that kind of feedback from the spouses and, having been a first responder and then live the life of a spouse, I can see it from a couple of different perspectives. And it is really heartwarming that you sort of can be an advocate for the spouses in that respect. And I think as well, from a spouse perspective, I think it would help a lot of spouses understand their partners too. So it's not only about advocating for them. I think it's also not like an instruction manual, but it's like, this is some of the shit that we see that I'm never, ever, ever going to come home and tell you about. Like my husband, we've been together for 11, married for 10 and a half years. And he openly says to me, because we chat, and he's like, I don't come home and tell you half the shit I say. I'm like, I know. I'm like, because you were doing this for however many years, like more than half of your career by the time I even came on the scene. So I don't expect you to change the way that you cope just because you're with me. I want to support you, and I hope that if you want to or you need to, you know that you can. That's really all that's important. He has his own coping skills and mechanisms, and I'm sure some are healthy and some are maladaptive, and he is his own person, and all I can do in the capacity of being his wife is to support him in the best way that I can, or the best way that he asked me to. So in that respect, being able to read your book, I think kind of just can give spouses like a little bit of a snapshot to go, okay, like this is why they don't come home and talk to us about it all the time. because they don't, and there is that old thing of like they don't want a bedness, or it's that old school notion of like you don't bring it home and all of the things. But equally, as a responder, and I'm sure you would be getting feedback in regards to this and the conversations you have on your podcast, like putting it out there makes people know that they're not alone, that experiencing suicidal ideation as a first responder is actually incredibly common. And sorry, I spoke over you. You were going to say something.
No, I agree with you. The part of coming home and communicating with your spouse, I would never advocate coming home and doing a trauma dump. I would never advocate that. And you don't have to do that, but some type of communication. Hey, had a really rough day. Can I get like 20 minutes? Can I go for a walk? Or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to hit the gym. Maladaptive. I'm going to hit the bar before I come home. Whoa, wait. We all have stories, a dozen stories of why that doesn't work. But, having something to where they're not kept in the dark, helping them, giving them the information. Because I thought about this just last week, having a spouse and you're in the first responder world, it's like they're in the passenger seat and you get, a near crash. You know, how you get the tingles and everything, like, oh my God, that was awful. Well, I would imagine the spouses have that feeling because they're in the passenger seat. If you share with them that you've had a bad day, or you share with them, hey, I'm short right now because it was a stressful day. It's only a 5-minute drive home from my zone. I didn't have time to decompress. So if I'm short with you, it has nothing to do with you or the kids. It's because I've had a rough day and I need to off gas a little bit. It can be that simple, because if you don't do that, and again, I'm speaking, I am in no position to give professional advice. I am in a position, though, to tell you my experience based on the things I've done wrong. Coming home and not saying anything, they feel that it's because they didn't have dinner ready. And I know that's kind of an archaic way of thinking, or because they didn't get your dry cleaning, or because they didn't speak to you this morning before you left, or whatever. They feel like the problem is with them, not with you.
So I can explain exactly what you're trying to say right now. We take their mood and their disposition and we internalize it. That's what we do.
And that's not healthy for anybody.
Yeah, because when there isn't an explanation, when we haven't been provided an explanation, or we don't have the knowledge and the education to understand how their roles can affect them, which is something that we don't do well enough for the spouse community. When there is no explanation, we're like, oh, well, unless we've done that work, the only explanation is, oh, I did something wrong. I fucked up. I've made him, she, they, whatever. I've made them mad. I'm upset them. All of the things. And trust me, like I've been that spouse sometimes it's just tired. But then like being tired and shitty is also like mimics PTS symptoms a lot of the time. Like there is so much crossover of just being fatigued and all of the things. There is so much crossover, so it's incredibly difficult to reconcile and understand. But when we internalize it, then we feel like shit, and then there's silence, and then there's resentment, and
then it just keeps going into a doom loop. In best case scenario, you think to yourself, oh, I guess I just married an asshole. But I will say this, on the part of the responder, when they come home, understand you're not the only game in town. You left 12 hours ago or 24 hours ago, and your beloved had to wake up with 2 sick kids, a sick kid, doctor's appointments, a dog that needed to get its shots, a parent who may be ill and you had to go take care of them, a neighbor who's in distress and you made them a meal so they didn't have to worry about it. Life continues to go on while we're at work, and to come home and think we're the only game in town, again, speaking from my experience, well, you're an asshole. And the thing is though, you'll only understand that in your own time. You can't be told that because now you're just being shitty and unappreciative of what I do for the family. Michelle said that stuff to me for years. She's like, I feel like I'm a single parent. I feel like I'm doing this all by myself. And I used to be so offended by that. Of course, I would never say anything, but I'd be offended. Aren't you appreciative of all the overtime I'm working and the things I can provide? And no, none of that stuff mattered. Your presence and being present is what mattered.
Yeah.
And coming home in a bad mood and allowing that to permeate through, at some point, you're going to have to realize that and atone for that. And I told Michelle, I was like, hey, look, every time you said that to me, this is how I felt. But it was only until now that I realized you were asking for my help, but didn't know how. And I am sorry that I either undervalued that or I missed that or I made you feel less than. And here she is crying. And now I'm crying because I'm like, oh man, I finally figured this out at 50 years old, 14 years after that last conversation. And she's like, look, I don't want you to regret or to be shameful or be mad at yourself. The fact that you validated that feeling and that I wasn't crazy all of these years is all I needed.
Oh,
and the rest of the day is a happy date day. I'm like, what? Wait a second.
Yeah.
You mean I was just honest and thoughtful and sincere and now we're going to go have ice cream? Is this how that works? It's amazing what honest communication can do. So yeah, for the spouses, understand that we value your role, even though we don't see it yet. We will one day, and it may be a long wait. But to the responders, brothers and sisters, you're not the only game in town. Life is moving with or without you, and you need to understand that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's harder than what it is that you dealt with that day. So anyway. A little compassion, a little empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is something that is incredibly common and like you said it, and literally everything you just said could have been like a conversation that my husband and I have just had. It's like you have the conversation and there's the words that you're speaking and then there's the meaning and what you're seeking, what you're looking for underneath it. And if you're missing it and they're missing it, like you're not actually communicating effectively. And that's what needs to be happening for you guys to find that like healthy baseline where you know what I'm trying to get across and I can understand what where you're coming from and what you're trying to get across. And that is individual to each individual couple. But figuring it out, like having come from a place where like we had to figure it out as we went along, life and marriage and our relationship is so much better when you do reach that point. And like, don't get me wrong, like, I will still call him out and tell him he's being an absolute dick sometimes, but sometimes he needs to hear it, and sometimes I need to hear it too. Like I'm not immune in this, but when you have the right and effective communication, it's definitely leads to the better outcomes, shall we say.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I know we've spoken a lot about the book, Hiding in Plain Sight. I got my delightful copy. Where can, and it's only been out for 2 weeks. So this is probably going to come out in like the next week or two. So we're probably going to be knocking into December. So great Christmas present, shall we say. Where can people find it, Doug?
You can find it on just about anywhere. Apple Books, Books A Million, Target.com, Walmart. I would prefer, unless you're completely against Amazon, I would prefer people to go to Amazon and get it.
Okay.
Not because I make less money, I think. I don't even know how much I make off of a book. I know I will never make a mortgage payment off of the book sales. So that was kind of disheartening.
Don't sell yourself short there, Doug.
So I would prefer everybody go to Amazon because that's the big one that people go to. those numbers drive and put it at the top of the list and the top of those categories. And I only want that for visibility.
Yep.
Get it wherever you want to get it from. It doesn't matter to me. Wherever you get it from, I would love for someone to leave a remark and a rating. Again, it's the numbers that are going to drive the visibility to get it to people. That's all I want. I want it in the hands of the people who need it. And I want them to read it, because the message is clear. There is a way forward, and I mean we didn't even touch really the growth part of this, and I want people to get the book to see that. Because this book is a win. The story is a win. It's winning. Yeah. It wasn't easy, and we'll still go with our bad days, but yeah. Amazon.com, you can do it. Go to my website, DougWhiteOfficial.com. You can find me on any of the socials, links to the book there. Yep. It's all there.
Yeah, I'll put all of your details in the show notes. And if anyone wants to get in contact with Doug for speaking engagements, all that kind of thing, you will have all of the information in the show notes. Probably one of the last things that I wanted to touch on with you, in that something that you've really just kind of been going through recently and in real time, is you've been undergoing a new treatment in regards to some of your either PTS or depression symptoms, and it's called ETMS, which, let me pull out my notes. So it's transcranial magnetic stimulation. And from what I understand, the treatment that you're receiving is quite a, not like specified, but like individualized treatment for your particular brain. So it's painless, it's non-invasive. It is used to stimulate the nerve cells in the brain to improve symptoms of things like depression, headaches, post-traumatic stress, mood control, all that kind of thing. So take it away with what you'd like to share about it, because I know this is something you're feeling very passionately about right now.
I am trying to explain it. It was explained to me and said, "Oh, that makes sense," but trying to re-explain it. So brainwaves, and neuropathways, neuroplasticity, all of the buzzwords that I've heard that I can't explain. There's plenty of stuff out there. Andrew Huberman speaks about it quite a bit. Okay. So from my understanding, the different brainwaves function at specific frequencies. When you go to ETMS treatments, they do a baseline EEG and ask you a whole bunch of questions. They want to see where your brainwaves are. They can see the results of TBIs, CTE, basically your lizard brain firing when you're in when you are in a hypervigilant state, and so first responders
your amygdala.
Yes, the amygdala. So in my experience, having been in that state for 30 years, and I've got several stories since I've retired, to where I've been placed in those positions where, the fight or flight. For me, it was always fight or fight. But to be looking for a fight and there's none to be had, and realizing, oh my God, this was the state of my body for 30 years. And I'm like crumbling right now. I'm sweating. I'm cotton mouth. I feel like a bunny rabbit that's just been chased. Yeah. It's like, so that was my natural state for 30 years. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was telling. But what ETMS does is it optimizes your brain waves and allows your sleeping brain waves, your dreaming brain waves, and your executive function brain waves to recalibrate, to optimize. It basically puts the lizard brain back in its cage. So if you're, always at a 9 or an 8, that jump to 10 and overreacting to spilt milk, or, whatever it is one of the kids did, that's an absolute nothing to regularly functioning life.
Yeah.
that step to go to a 10 and completely overreact is not a big step at all.
Yeah, because you're already like
You're
highly
already
activated.
peaked.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what this does is it re-regulates the brain waves by stimulating at a certain frequency based on your own brain waves. The
Yeah.
protocol is specifically to you. It recalibrates everything to kind of put that lizard brain back to sleep. Now you're fully functioning. You can still be alert when you need to be alert. You can still go to work and be fully functioning and be able to call on that to react appropriately. But your resting state, instead of being in an 8, is a 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So spilt milk just becomes spilt milk.
Spilt milk.
And it's not an issue.
Yeah.
Since
I mean,
I've been
it really
doing,
sounds like it's just bringing someone who has had that chronic stuck in that state and your elevated cortisol, and obviously that would have played into your sleep and your immunity and all that kind of thing, like basically helping your body reset and return to homeostasis so you can just level out, and part of that is that rewiring of your brain.
yes, and that's exactly what it is, because PTS is not just a thing. It's not a disorder. It's a constellation of injuries and illness that feed off of one another that over time your body adapts to.
Yeah.
Again, this is not something that can be compelled by taking Motrin or hydrating, changing your socks. It's just, those little things, they don't help with this. This is a rewiring of your physiological and your mental state, and it needs to be unwired.
Yeah.
So getting blood work, getting your diet right, getting your exercise right, getting your sleep right, therapy, medications if needed. There's 800,000 cops working in this country, and there's probably 800,000 different combinations of what will and will not work. And it's as individualized as the person and the signs and symptoms that they have.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about ETMS until I started taking it, until I went to the treatment. We're very lucky here that in Florida, they are very, the legislators here are a lot of veterans and first responders, and they are really driving good legislation for care of veterans and first responders.
Amazing.
And there's a grant that pays for every bit of this. And it's in Florida. So if you're a first responder or a veteran in Florida, there's 2 clinics, one in Miami and one here in Tampa. There's going to be a second in Tampa, and I think another 3. So a total of 5 or 6 statewide. And all this stuff is paid for by the state. Since I've undergone treatments, I'm sleeping through the night. No nightmares. Except there was one night that I had nightmares. Vivid, childlike dreams. Like if you're walking down the beach and, you let go of your red balloon, you can see the red balloon, the string, and, you're chasing after it, the sand in your toes. I mean, just dreaming like a kid. Sound sleep, sleeping through the night. Hours
Actually
longer.
waking up refreshed.
Waking up refreshed. Now, again, there's a one-off here and there. But the overall changes in the 2.5 weeks I've been going through this, I think today was day 13 of 20. No changes in appetite. It's painless, pill-free. I initially was prescribed, the VA starter kit. Here's a whole bunch of pills. Take this stuff together, and you'll be treated. Maybe. Before undergoing ETMS, I titrated off of everything. I take nothing now but fish oil and water. So I've been able to get off all the medication. I'm sleeping better. I've had no headaches or migraines since I started this protocol, which is something that plagued me quite often. So if you could find something for free that is non-invasive, no medications, pain-free, that will allow you to sleep through the night, why wouldn't you try it?
Absolutely.
So it's been pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And is this sort of something that's like, obviously you're doing like a program, but from what they've told you, is this kind of like a once off, or is this something that if you sort of end up experiencing symptoms again, you can kind of go back and like almost do like a bit of like a top-up type of thing? Like,
Yes. This is optimization that you can go back and get tune-ups later. They gave me a pamphlet with their with some of the stuff that they're doing, with what they found in their Ohio clinics, and ETMS versus standard treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. The standard treatment, which is counseling, medication, and all that stuff, there's a 12% success rate. With ETMS, 60%.
Jesus.
Depression, 31% through standard, 60 through ETMS. Anxiety, 58 versus 22. Insomnia, 55% versus 21. There's no one magic bullet. There's no, catch-all. But, when they see that they had people that were addicted to hardcore narcotics, opiates, that have come in, done a standard treatment along with ETMS, and they're looking at a 60% success rate of people not going back to drugs.
That's incredible.
Just listening to some of the success stories, and again, anecdotally, but then seeing the numbers that they put together for Congress to get states to pay for this stuff. I'm all about it.
Yeah. No, I never heard of it until I saw you sort of start sharing about it, and Doug has kindly does basically there's like a daily video where he recounts his experience and how he's feeling and his progress and all that kind of thing, which you can follow him on Instagram, and he shares them. So it sort of made me do like a little bit of a deep dive, and it's part of the reason why I love having different people with different experiences, within like the first responder realm on this podcast, because it's hearing about these different kinds of options. And like we're saying, like there's no one size fits all, because all of our experiences and all of our trauma exposure and just our lives in general are all so varied and so different. Like I had a former guest tell me about he went to like a sensory deprivation tank. That was Justin. And that was what worked for him. And there's just like so many different options out there available. So I love hearing about this, and thank you so much for sharing your experience about it. So I hope you'll continue along the path of it helping to heal you in some.
I will know more. I did an EEG mid-phase last week, and I'm meeting with the doctor on Wednesday. So I'll actually have some quantitative stuff that I'll be able to talk about on my next video. So we'll see then. I'll post that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And is it sort of they do like one at the start, one in the middle, and then one at the end to kind of be able to like calibrate the differences?
Yeah, that's exactly how they do it. And it was funny too, because when the doctor was meeting with me and going over my EEG, she says, so you've had a lot of head trauma. I was like, oh, I don't know. And she says,
you're like, you tell me.
Yeah. I mean, there's, blast overpressure from explosions, a lot of gunfire, car crashes, tackling bad guys, stuff like that. So things that I would not think about, that's not trauma. It's not a TBI. Yeah, it is, apparently. So,
wow. Well, it is in your body brain, apparently, which is getting healed as we speak. So that's great.
Yes.
All right. And just lastly, because I don't want to monopolize too much of your time, I know that you've also recently launched a podcast. So even on the socials, your handle is Tell This Story.
Yes.
And I understand that is also like your kind of the banner or your kind of corporation that you operate under, if that makes sense. And it's also the name of your podcast. So what would you like to tell our listeners about that if they're interested in jumping on and having a listen?
Well, Tell the Story, the podcast. First, the brand. And again, it just sounds so weird saying I have a brand. Tell the Story is basically the call to action. I want people to be able to tell their story, to find space in my narrative and the narrative of the people that are telling their stories. To realize, one, you're not alone. To realize there are people out there that that are stepping out into the light and finding their way forward. I just want to share those stories. I don't want to make it trauma dumps or any of that stuff or true crime. I want people to tell them, the wins. Here's the success. Here's the wins. Here's how I'm moving forward.
Yep.
So the podcast will have veterans, we'll have retired and active first responders, spouses. It's still just really trying to find its way. I think episode 3 comes out tomorrow morning, and that's going to be with Jessica Flores from The Next Shift. Then I've got 2 more that'll launch after that. I've got a 3rd one that I'm going to put out as a bonus today. And as soon as I figure out how to book people for the time, I'll just continue to go until either I still have the same 4 listeners that I'm bragging. I probably only have 3 listeners, but we'll take it as far as it goes. As long as people want to listen, I'll keep telling my story to whomever. So tell this story is just that. It's a call to action. Tell your story.
No, I love that. I think it is important because, like you're saying, it's like that call to action. It's kind of saying it's not tell my story, it's tell everyone's story. Tell this story of, potentially how you may have been challenged or had difficult times, but give us that perspective of how you've grown, how you've experienced that post-traumatic growth, how you have found your resilience. And I really, really I love that for you, because you are this living, breathing example of, telling your story, finding your resilience, not just surviving, thriving and finding your new path forward, all, like we were saying, kind of while still in the trenches, but you looks like you're in a good position.
I'm really enjoying this. The impact that it's having, the feedback that I'm getting is just it's awesome.
No, that's fantastic. And look, if it makes you feel any better, I started this podcast a bit over 12 months ago now, and I think I reached out to you, so maybe I'm making a liar of myself, but most of the time people just, randomly reach out. They're like, hey, I see you have a podcast. I'd love to come on. I'm like, sure. So it's like the more that it's out there and into the ether and people listen and you hope find like a little bit of value, well, they in turn come back and end up being wonderful guests. So I think it'll be easier than you think.
Well, I'm glad you reached out to me, because I'm still trying to find my outside voice and be a big kid and start, hey, can I be on your podcast? I don't know how to do that. Who are you again? I wrote a book. Yeah. So.
Oh, Jay, no, trust me. I was so that person. Some of my some of my earlier guests were like friends. And then I think the first person I reached out to when I was so nervous, and he could probably know this, it was Travis Gribble from My Arena. Oh, I love him so much. And I was
I'm not big enough for Travis Gribble yet. Not big enough for Travis.
So lovely.
Yeah, he's awesome. I love what he's doing.
Oh my God. And he and we were sort of connected through the Overwatch Collective. So we sort of had, peripheral sort of interaction. I was like sweating and nervous and like typing him a freaking message. And he was so sweet. And all I got back was, I would absolutely love to. I was really hoping that you would ask me. And I was like, should have seen me. I was like beaming with pride. So the what's the word? I think the attitude I had to learn to take was like, the worst they can say is no. And then you go, okay, cool. No skin off my nose. But this community, and, I'm the tiniest little fish in it, but we are all here for the right reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And the people that aren't, you could see that very quickly. Very quickly.
Absolutely.
I've been approached by mercenaries, and I prefer to be a missionary.
Oh, I like that.
It's not mine. A friend told me that and gave me that advice. I'm like, that's there are a lot of big personalities that are doing very, very good stuff. Yeah. And there's a lot of space. There's a lot of space, because not a lot of us are doing it, and not a lot are doing it for all the right reasons. So yeah, I think this is a positive thing. But yeah, Travis Gribble's great. Overwatch Collective, what you're doing. So all of the people that I've met are just so wonderful, and just 99.9% of the people I've met are just completely wonderful, and just have hearts for what they're doing, and hopefully that takes off. Hopefully we all work ourselves out of a mission here.
Oh, wouldn't that be spectacular?
That's the goal.
I know, right? Yeah. So, look, I don't want to keep you any longer. You have been very generous with your time today, Doug. So I just do want to say thank you. I will pop all of the details, all of the social media handles, everything like that into the show notes. And we normally finish this podcast by asking our guests 2 questions. And it comes from the title of the podcast, I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, which, as anyone's previously listened, it comes from a Brené Brown quote. And like we've sort of discussed for the last couple of hours, there is a lot of darkness that we see in our roles. And so the first question that I like to ask is, what do you do to hold space for your darkness, Doug?
Didn't know there was going to be a test.
You should have read the email.
I did. No, I did. I did. I knew there was going to be a test.
I know it. I'm kidding.
I think as I grow, what I do is I try to be still. I don't try to solve my own problems. Not everything needs a solution. It just needs to. You just need to sit with things and let things work out in their own times. Be still. Allow the problem to speak to you and figure out what it means. When you find it out, and if you figure it out, and when you work to a solution, or you find that there's an issue, don't try to wish it away or avoid it. I have found that I have to be intentional as I move through it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do. I just allow myself to be still. I allow myself the space without any judgment, because I know what that does. And I just intentionally move one step to the next step.
Mm-hmm. That's a very mindful approach. Do you practice mindfulness? Yeah.
I'm really working on it. I have a journal that I don't write my mindfulness stuff in, but I think about it. And I'm trying to be better at that.
Yeah. I from an outsider's perspective, I think you're doing good with it.
Thank you.
And the last question is, what can someone do, whether it's a loved one or a colleague or anything like that, what can they do in order to support you being able to hold space for that darkness?
Again, this is something that I work on because, first responders were problem solvers. We want to give you the answer. We want to help you and bring you quick resolution. Not everything needs that. I think just for me, just sitting with me and allowing me to process and just being there, even if it's in complete silence, if you can do that for somebody else without judgment, without trying to fix anything, just listen and try to understand and just be there, be present. I think that's the best thing someone can do for me. And when I'm ready, I'll bring it to you. Mm-hmm. So that's really it. And I work on that because I want to solve problems. Yes.
Being the problem solver and being in control, I think, is something that plagues our population a little bit more than some of the others. All right. You have been so wonderful and so generous with your time. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing, your truth with us. And I hope that people take away something really, really positive from your experience, because you have obviously been through a lot and you are putting it out there in order to help others. And I think it's really meaningful and really admirable. And if we have not flogged it enough, go and pick up Doug's book, preferably on Amazon. I am. And look, I am not a liar. So I am up to, I think 130 I got to culturally competent. It is something that I have really enjoyed reading, and it is raw and it is authentic, but it is impactful and meaningful. So do yourself a favor and go check it out if you haven't already. All right. We will let you go, Doug.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for your time. I love what you're doing. I love the platform, and just this has been great. I looking at the timer, I can't believe it's been over 2 hours. So
I know.
thank you for your time and
No. It's been my
access
pleasure.
to your platform and your listeners. This is great. Thank you so much.
No, it's been wonderful. All right, this has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I've been your host, Erin Jane, and as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.